Okay, we are out of executive session. It is 3:47 p.m. and no actions were taken in executive session. Okay, so next item on the agenda is executive director report. So what I'm working on now is part of it is we're talking about today is I put some time into drafting an annual budget and running that past the finance committee and working with London Middlebury on the draft annual report. There's a couple of changes to the annual report, and one of the things that I want to do that won't happen before I circulate the draft budget tomorrow to the governing board, but after that is to spend more time refining the financial model, which of course also relates to what we discussed in executive session, specifically to incorporate the long drop program. Now that we understand at least the amount of the award, and I want to spend, the model doesn't anticipate exogenous events like this. It sort of has assumptions about how fast people take service, based on when you turn up a serving area. So I have to make some changes to incorporate that with a little bit more level of nuance than what I did in order to get the draft budget out. And related to that as well is the corrective action plans from the 2024 audit are plans that we anticipated being done with those by the end of October. So the analysis part that sits with me is a priority to get done in the next couple of days to get off to Darlene. And then also the long drop program preparation. So I have some discussion on that later down in the agenda, but one of the things that I'm trying to do is just pull together. There's a whole bunch of things that need to happen to make that happen and to have the public launch. And some of it is the consumer facing, is the user journey for consumers and how they register their interest and what information we provide at what point, and all of the different parts that we're going to need to have in terms of getting that program actually operationalized. So the conversation I want to have later on is specifically around drops and drop contractors and what I'm thinking there in terms of timing. But there's quite a bit of work that I've already started to do there, and so I'm going to continue to do, and watch this space, because I will probably be circulating some of those materials via email even before our next executive committee meeting, just to get another set of eyes for whoever has time. And then the final thing is obviously the network management agreement. Steve and I had a call with Eileen and Roger earlier today, and I think it was a good discussion because we resolved many of the items that are cleanup in that agreement. We have had agreement on for a very long time now, and we were kind of stuck on some of the more gnarly issues, and I think we are working our way through those gnarly issues. So that is also a good thing. So there's item 6E in relation to the legal counsel. Steve had raised that last week, so I want to talk about that further down the agenda as well. That's my report. Questions, comments, concerns? Okay, Steve, I think you're if you can mute when you're typing, it's quite loud. Thank you. Okay, all right. So moving on to section 6. The first item in the agenda is the 2025 projection. So this is the financial pro forma through the end of this year and the draft 2025 annual report. Can we start by reviewing the annual report, and then we can move into because that way we're going from annual report to finances rather than finances report back to the draft 2026 budget? Okay, so I circulated this as part of the board pack. Sorry, Zapata, you didn't get it. We can run over it quickly now, and this is going to go out. I've asked London Middlebury if they can cycle this so that I can send out a revised version before the governing board tomorrow. I've rewritten page 2, and I need to rewrite the page that talks about 2026. And I've got a little bit too much copy on the first page, so I might move it to the last page. I've got to cut that down because I did say in the email, please ignore those pages because they need to be rewritten. I was not. I thought the copy was a little bit uninspired. So having a having a go with that. But yes, I think I can share my screen, and I'd love to hear any feedback that you guys have on anything else other than the copy on those 2 pages. You can see my screen, yes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Ellie, on page 5, can you tell me more about that legend?
This one?
The map?
Oh, this also needs to be updated That was in
Okay.
my email. So the idea here, what they're going to do is they're going to make all the fiber routes. They need to get the updated fiber routes from Waitsfield, um, and they're going to make all the fiber routes the same color, and then they're going to put a different background color for the WCVT footprint service area and ours, because that's probably one of the most common questions that we get from residents is people are confused about who serves them. So, because unlike last year, we were trying to show the year-over-year progress. This year, we're more interested in just showing what's the current state and then clarifying who's got who.
Good. Thank you.
Yep. Other comments?
So when you say there's going to be revisions on page 2, like Steve just put out the number for the new customers. It's clearly more than 616. So you'll be updating those numbers to represent current time.
Yes, that's one of the tweaks. I think I need to double check that number. Double check this number. I think so. Just to remind everyone of the process under statute, we need to distribute this to our member towns by the end of this, along with the pro forma and budget to our member towns by the end of this month. So, going to get it as accurate as we possibly can before the governing board next week. But there may still be a couple of minor copy tweaks, and the real review is going to be the December, because these numbers may still change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like for example, around construction, we have plans for the rest of the year, but that could shift up or down by a couple of miles depending on make ready and some other things. So these are going to be some of these are going to be best guesses. But yes, and again, the number of customers we distribute in October is going to be different than the number of customers we distribute in the end of December distribution, which is going to be updated for the whole year.
So I think that on this page, we just want to make sure that it's, and maybe it already is very clear because I read it pretty quickly yesterday, that what's in that green section, securing our future. It's fine to mix what's happened this year and what's happened before this year, but we just need to make sure that in each of those sections, it's very clear that we're either talking about just this year or total from the beginning. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like 616 customers is our total from the very onset.
Well, it's our current number in active service, and then in the fine print it says how many new were added this year. Because my thinking was I don't for we could be consistent if we're going to be consistent with how we phrase each of these things. We could say 150 customers added, but I thought that especially like I didn't want to say 11 miles added because that looks bad. I thought it looked better to say like here's the current total, and then we put, because I mean like this year we have not, and you guys all know the reasons why, but we haven't built a lot this year.
Right.
What we've done this year is we've got $14 million new dollars in funding, which helps us finish the job. That's the headline,
and that's
right?
very clear.
Yeah.
That's very clear in all the copy. I'm just saying that, for example, the 616 it could be clarified by saying 616 total current customers or whatever. So just to make it very clear what each one really means. But I think the general, I mean, generally speaking, Ellie, I thought that the story you told is very clearly told. And it's very clear that, what happened this year was in planning that was essentially, we didn't stop building, but the focus was on planning so that we would be able to continue to build and reach the ultimate goal.
Yeah, and the new copy I've drafted for this moves away from saying, hey, we've been planning, and it basically focuses on we have achieved $14 million in new funding and we've launched 2 new affordability initiatives. And then the final page is going to go into, because no one cares about our planning, like they care about what we've done, I think. Steve?
Yeah, it occurred to me that one consistent approach that kind of might help Nancy's concern is that if we throw a verb in each of these items, so the first thing says we've awarded, new funding's been awarded. but the customers does not say 616 total customers, or something like that. 251 total miles built. And then the next one is 2. We could say, 2 launched. So I think we're not consistent in terms of saying the action associated with these items. And I don't know how we might rewrite it, but that might help inform that.
Yep, I agree with that. Okay, anything else on this? We do have quite a lot to cover in the next time. A lot of people have to leave in half an hour, so okay, I'm going to move on from this.
I just want to say I do love the look of it. I think it's very appealing. I love the messaging. I love the photographs.
They're local now.
It's really very nice. I mean, I think it's compelling.
Yeah, it's exactly the same design as last year, except for that we combined 2 pages. Used to be, we made it a little bit shorter, but it's very similar to last year, but we have updated images. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the budget. So starting here with the 2025 projection, can you guys see that? It could be, actually no, it's actually all here. If I make this a little bit bigger. So this is if you look at the spreadsheet you were sent, if you go to the 2025 projected, that takes the budget to actual for the entire year, and you can see more detail about what I've projected is still to come. If you want to drill into that detail. And then this is just the compilation of what's the current projection for 2025. And then it's right next to the budget for 25, the budget, and then the proposed budget for 2026. And then these yellow things are my homework that I need to do. And I want to, before I send to the governing board, I'm going to put a little bit more narrative here in this column so that they can understand and interpret some of these numbers.
I would call that middle column projected actuals.
Okay. Easy enough to do that. Save. So would you like me to go over this, or I know Zapata, you haven't seen it, but presumably the rest of you have reviewed it. I know that Lynn and Sai have, because we looked at it in the Finance Committee.
Right.
I think maybe what I'll do then is a lot of these are simply projections based on what the model suggests, and then as I kind of alluded to earlier for the long drop, I kind of hacked the model to put in 150 new customers, over the summer months. So I think probably the most important thing is just to orient you. I have a couple of different tabs here around the different capital programs that we have. So we have the ARPA, because we have our construction grants that we need to finish spending money from, or otherwise it goes away. And we have the long drop, where this presumed that we got the total amount of our request, which it looks like was recommended by staff and hopefully will be blessed by the board. And then BEAD, where I basically just made a complete guess, and then based on the guess, I put in some expenditures. But this one, as we know, it would be disingenuous to have a budget that didn't have anything with BEAD, because we're a provisional awardee, but we honestly have no idea. So I wouldn't waste your brain cells thinking about this one too much. So, and the same thing, basically for ARPA and the long drop, it's fairly simple from a budget perspective. We have money, we want to spend every dollar of it. So what categories I chose to put that into in terms of the capital budget is my best guess, but it can be arbitrary. We'll probably refine it over time. And then on the income side, just want to explain these a little bit. We have already drawn down the balance, all the cash from our pre-construction grant. This is the balance of our construction grant, and town ARPA, that's all over. The BEAD match, so this is, I have made assumptions that, so this is the 30% of the amount of our award that we can apply. So I've invoiced for that already. That should be paid this year. This is the balance. This is the next 50%, which happens on, that milestone is payable on the, when we get our BEAD grant papered, which I am presuming it might happen in fourth quarter, but even if it does, we're probably not going to get the money for another 30 days. So I stuck that in next year's projection. And then the final 20% is something like 1 year after your first report or something. So that'll be a 2027 payment. So this is just to remind everyone, this is our proportion of the $30 million appropriated by the legislature for federal match. So, and the terms of that let us get some cash up front for working capital, and we have no idea what the BEAD milestones will be. So hopefully this $1 million plus will be in our bank account soon, and we can start making interest on it.
So can that be labeled BEAD match from legislature, or, because otherwise
Sure.
I think it's confusing. That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep. Oops.
Ellie, quick, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you say, this is about the, is this, I'm just looking at the line item. Okay, on the match, you put assumes payment happens in Q1, 2027. Should that be 26?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Details. Okay, and then the affordable long drop agreements, what I put in there as proposed milestones is that we have 30% on program launch and signed agreements, and then the balance on drop installations. That'd be 30% this calendar year and 70% next calendar year. And then BEAD, yeah. And then this is I'm considering having a tab that actually splits all this out and narrates a little bit better so that you guys can read it and others can read it and understand it without having to have me tell you about what the milestones are and when they're going to come. Okay, so moving down, a lot of these things are projections. Marketing and advertising and promotion, I think, is a discussion I want to have with the governing board. So I've asked London Middlebury, I asked them to put together a budget and then some discretionary things, because there's certain things like we have to pay them the retainer. Well, don't have to. We could cancel the retainer, but we I think we want to keep them. So there's certain things that are not really discretionary, like paying for crowd fiber and paying for the software we use for various automations and paying our marketing firm. And then they put together a proposed budget for advertising and promotion. And then they've also asked, like, one of the things that they would like to put on there as a topic for discussion is potentially having some budget to pay people to go door to door knocking to drum up business. And so I think that's something that the governing board can decide. I did put in here, I added some money to their recommended budget to have them or people that they would subcontract to man a Maple Broadband table at events, because I can do a couple, but to be really present at all these events is going to require more bodies. And when we talked about this at the governing board, we got a whole lot of silence. And so I think we should put it in the budget to pay for it. And if people don't want to pay for it, then they can sign up and we can save some money.
So change that word to staffing, though.
Staffing, yes. Okay. So I think I would like I've asked London Middlebury to give me a little bit more detail so we can have a more in-depth conversation with the governing board around some of these marketing, because I mean, some of these things are just straight projections. There's not really a lot to do, but this is one of the ones where we can actually have a discussion. How much do we want to budget for advertising and promotion? And something else I've asked for is that we are way under budget for advertising and promotion for this year. And so I asked them to just have a little bit of an explainer around that, and why, and also some explanation of what are the sorts of things that they think work. And like direct mail works, for example, and they feel that sponsorships work. And so I said, okay, that's great. I'll take your word for it, but can you give me a little bit more details? Because if someone asks me why, I can't answer that. So I've asked them to do that. So that should be a good conversation with the governing board next week.
And they have those metrics, right?
I haven't seen what they've put together yet, but yep.
Yeah.
Savannah?
Do we have a list of events that we know are annually reoccurring that we want to have a presence at, where we could put together a calendar year?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm certainly somebody that has to look out, 2 or 3 months, 6 months to put something on my calendar, depending on what time of year it's happening. So if as the governing board, if you came to me and said, oh, we really need somebody, in 3 weeks to blah, 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 the unfortunately, my answer is always going to be no. But if I knew back in I don't know, April, that you need somebody on July, blah, 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 and I can get it on my calendar, then that's maybe something I can work around.
Yep, agreed. So, I mean, that's part like this was just a conversation I had with them on just this week, Tuesday, to say, okay, your budget doesn't have anyone staffing events. And it seemed like you said that was important, and it didn't really happen this year because I didn't have the time and no one else volunteered other than field days. So I just threw a number in there, but we definitely need to flesh it out and do exactly that, because there is a calendar, at least the second half of the year. And I'm sure that they can easily update it for the first half of the year. Okay, moving on. I think this is a new one, having an accounting advisory services. But we talked about that as part of our corrective action plan. And there's a couple things that I'm waiting on updated quarterly statements from Waitsfield, so I may tweak these a little bit just to increase them if I haven't gotten that before end of day tomorrow. And then the website, this is an important thing to note. That was really a capital investment in redoing the website this year. And so we're paying all of like $89 a quarter or something for the Wix.com software. So the website itself is less than what we pay for our accounting software. So that's going to start getting coded under software subscriptions from January, and the website budget category is going to fall away. And yep, I don't really think there's too much else that's new, or I should say that's really worth going into too much detail on. So we'll be talking about this again at the governing board. Did anybody have any questions or anything that you wanted to drill in on? Okay, there's a loud noise coming from you, Steve. Thank you. Okay. All right.
So, Ellie,
Yep.
I have a question. It
Great.
looks to me like we achieved basically operational break even this year, or pretty darn close.
What are you looking at?
I'm looking at operational revenue projected for 2025 versus basically operational direct costs and operational indirect costs.
Let me see. So our projected revenues is that about 700,000? Actually, doesn't.
I see
739. Yeah, 740, and then 286 and 459. Let's just do the math quickly.
745.
Well, how do you
So
like
it's
that? Yeah,
yeah.
That's not bad.
I think that's
Almost.
a nice milestone.
Mm-hmm. That is a nice milestone.
Thank you, Simon.
We can celebrate more when we actually have our actuals in there, because there might be some expenses that are not anticipated.
Sure.
But yeah, not too bad. Then again, if we'd spent our entire promotions budget, we'd be under. But thank you, Adam. Good call out. We'll see where that sits at the end of the year. We'll pay attention to that. I should probably actually add that as a row here. Might be nice to see. Okay, anything else? Right. Let us move on. Okay. All right. So a number of you guys have to drop at 4:30. I want to talk about buried drop, but I'll keep that relatively brief, just to update you guys on my current thinking, and we can have a quick discussion about that. And then I distributed the updated JSI proposal, which was updated with through discussions with them, I discovered some items that we actually need that we'd not asked them to quote on. So this is a more comprehensive proposal. So I just thought, since we're meeting again, we may as well get the vote on the entire thing. Anyway, buried drop. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of work to do in terms of defining what the user journey looks like. But what I want to talk about here specifically is around the timing of when we're going to be doing things, and specifically around the contractor selection and my thoughts on doing an RFP there. So essentially, we're now sitting in October. It could be possible that we can get some of these installations done this year, and there might be some that we do under the program. Like there's a couple of private roads that we're planning to do buried mainline this year, and so we may do some long drops as part of those because it'll be more efficient. But what I was thinking is, rather than trying to launch this to the public and then have a big rush and then maybe the ground freezes and it becomes like this cascade of chaos, that what will probably be more prudent given where we are in the year is to launch the program and really use the winter to market the heck out of it, build urgency around it with the idea of hitting the ground running and getting a pipeline of customers who are interested in service, committed to service, that we get all the easements in place, we get all the contracts in place, and then in, say, March, we put out our RFP at that point for construction work, and then we'll know, do we have 50 customers in the pipeline or do we have 100 customers in the pipeline that need buried work? Because we'll get a better price the more that we can batch this up, because it's more efficient for contractors to be going and installing conduits for people who are geographically close to each other than driving all over the county from one end to the next. So that's my thinking around essentially how to launch the program. We'll launch it in later this month or November as promised, and then we will get people signed up, and we'll plan to install a large number of them in the spring, and then not everyone will, and so we'll continue doing installations over the spring and over the summer. Thoughts on that at this point?
Ellie, from where I sit, it appears to me every time I hear you mention something, there's another thing that you mentioned that has to be addressed, like easements. And so it feels to me like there's lots of moving pieces associated with this effort. And I, for one, have no idea what those moving pieces look like. I'd asked you before about possibly a Gantt chart or something like that, but I guess overall, I think I'd be a lot more comfortable with what we're doing if I knew who's doing what and when. And at this point, I'm worried. I'm worried because I don't, what do we forget? I guess is we don't know that yet because we really haven't cooked it up yet. So thoughts?
Well, I completely agree, and that's what I mentioned earlier in my executive director report. Is one of the things I'm doing now is to get all that out there, and specifically around that, one of the things that I budgeted for in the program and that we need to do an RFP for sooner than later is the human services around customer coordination and scheduling and getting the easements done and getting contracts in place and coordinating with the contractors, because I don't have enough time to do that. So my thinking was, obviously, we outsource that. There's a couple of entities that come immediately to mind. One is Waitsfield, another is Mission, another is an EKCV because they have like 15 staff members that are going to be doing this in-house. There could be others as well. We'll put out a wider RFP. But essentially the plan is to outsource all that. And a lot of what needs to happen is to make sure that we have the right materials in place so that we say, okay, here's the form you need to fill out. And here is exactly the series of steps you need to do. And here's how you do this and here's how you do that. And the good news, by the way, is that every other grantee, including Waitsfield, but certainly the other CUDs are in the same boat, and we're all having to design a lot of the same systems at once. So we are going to be having some of the Vacuda working groups working on refining this, but I also don't want to be waiting on that process. I think it's great to be able to get some learnings and ideas from the others. I mean, Krista shared with me a draft RFP because they want to start doing, they have a lot more installations that they need to do under this program than we do. And so they want to get them done this year. And so that's great. We can learn from what RFP they distribute and copy paste for what makes sense to that, adapt it, see what works, see what doesn't before we launch ours. But I totally agree with you, Steve. So I think by the next time we meet, there will be more details available on this because there have to be, because we need to launch this thing. We've already set expectations. We're going to launch the program in November. I would like to do it this month still if possible, but regardless, we're going to be launching it in November. By the time 2 weeks from now comes around, we're going to need to have the details. Okay. So that's that. All right. So the next item in the agenda, does anyone else have any questions on that? I think we've probably covered it enough at this point. We'll have a lot more in the future. Let me find the JSI proposal that I distributed. Okay. And I'm going to call it up here on the screen so that we can all be looking at it. Okay, so just to remind everyone, this portion here, we put out an RFP for last year for BEAD pre-award and post-award, and JSI was the clear winner on that one. And we had two other bidders, which was Fibersmith and Vantage Points, and the JSI proposal was the winner across all metrics, if memory serves. Subsequent to that, there were, as I mentioned earlier, there are some items that we actually need as part of the service that we neglected to scope for at the time. And so the total here, which, did I add it up in my email? If not, we need to add it up quickly, is the totality of the proposal that we would like, I would like, and Steve, you can weigh in here, but I would like to have the executive committee accept so that I can go ahead and sign this proposal and get them going.
Agreed.
Okay, let me do the math.
So I'm out of my league here, but I know your intent was to use pre-construction funds to pay for JSI work.
Yes, that's correct.
So, so I think I saw a total in your document, in your spreadsheet. And I don't know if the number reflects that. I guess it would have to be updated once we have a conversation about this. But what's the total?
The total for all of these items here is 222,600. Okay.
22,600.
Two people have checked my math. All right. Will you do the necessary, Steve?
Yeah, in a moment. But didn't you say that Part B? I'm having difficulty reading that, but post-award engineering, that one is done, right?
That is not done. This the original RFP that we put out had a certain scope, and then they responded to that RFP at a certain price, and then the other items are separate scope. And like this one here, for example, Part C, this is they will be actually on a time and materials basis. So actually, that is a good clarification that this is an estimate. So the amount we're actually awarding is 222,600 minus that's 68,400, which is 154,200. That's a fixed bid. All these other items. This one here is time and materials. But what this is essentially going to do is to engineer and give enough information to WCBT that they will not need to be doing scouts of the BEAD locations. So if a BEAD customer orders, and even part of what we want to do under BEAD is what Waitsfield does when they're building, which is have JSI when they go out there to stake these drops, put a door hanger on there, do direct mail, try and get people in the BEAD routes to sign up for service immediately, so that or earlier, so that when if we know that someone is committing to service, we can install the drop at the same time as the main line.
I move we approve this JSI proposal for a total of $222,600 for the work associated with B construction. Is there a second? A second from Shannon and Nancy. Discussion. Inside. Discussion. Questions. Elliot's last comment, I think, is a good one related to the scouting that needs to be done. So that's always been kind of a challenge for how WCBT wants to check out new subscribers and make sure that they know what they're going to need to do to provide service to each new subscriber. And so what's been happening and has been certainly inserting some additional lead time to the work that they do is that we have some preliminary information, but they're not going to go and do an install until they go out and see what's needed. So that adds time to the process. And so part of what Ellie wisely wants to include is having all that preliminary scouting information done as part of a deliverable provided by JSI, which means suddenly that now WCBT is relieved of that step, and theoretically they'll be able to do work faster because that won't be inserted in their timeline. So I think that's really very welcome, and it also simplifies the process, and we're all about simplification. That's my talk, but any other questions or discussion? Are we ready to vote? We are ready to vote. All in favor of proceeding with awarding this scope as defined on that page in the amount of $222,600 to JSI, raise your hand or say aye.
Okay, thank you all. That is unanimous. I will be very happy to sign this and get them going. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is legal counsel. So Steve had raised the point last time we met about, or the question last time we met about how we should proceed with legal counsel support around getting the network management agreements revised. So I wanted to have a discussion about that topic.
Yeah, my pitch, Ellie, would be you gathered a great deal of worthwhile information from the very expensive lawyer that we initially engaged to help us with this. And it may be oversimplification, but I believe that their value is diminished now that we've gathered the information they provided, and we can engage a less expensive attorney to actually work on negotiating and executing an agreement. So I don't have a lot of passion about which one we'd use. I do know that we do have some funds not spent through Primer, Piper, Eggleston, and Kramer. I don't think it's a lot, a couple $1,000.
No,
So,
we've been going through that.
Okay, so maybe that's part of the argument, but probably not a lot. I think we're going to run up a lot of hours probably to get this finalized. So I think we need to kind of bear that in mind. So what I had gathered before was Primer was quoting 300 and change per hour for the lead, and a high $200 per hour for I don't know what the title was, but it was an assistant, or it was a paralegal, or maybe it was another legal resource, but it was, less qualified under some terms. And then the other lawyer that we have engaged in the past and been satisfied with and has done legal services for EC Fiber is Montrol and Edinger. Andy Montrol has served us well, and he's a little less expensive. I think he's $250 an hour, I think. So that would be an option that I think would be okay too. So those are my two thoughts. And again, I kind of disinclined to want to go with a very expensive lawyer just because we only have so much money, but that's my view.
And we're also not paying for this with a specific extra bead grant. So there is an opportunity cost here. So I'm not sure we necessarily have a decision to be made today. I think we can get other opinions on this. I think that what is probably the most important isn't so much the firm, but what individual we have working on this and what skills they have, because I think that what we talked about the last time is the need to be able to have enough familiarity with federal grants compliance of the current grants that are awarded and so on to make sure that we are covered with what I always find the hardest thing in reviewing any sort of document, whether legal or anything else, isn't commenting on what is there, but it's thinking about what may not be there that ought to be there. So, but I mean, having said that, there are two kind of different levels of service. One is that one, which is giving a look over the thing to say, okay, what are the things that you may not have thought of specifically around grant compliance that is upstream and not necessarily, because if you read our grants, there's what the grant says, and then it refers to multiple other documents, incorporates them by reference, and some of those things incorporate other things by reference. And if you don't have familiarity with all things all the way along the line, you might wind up with a problem. Having said that, this network management agreement, only part of it is that, like our ARPA grant is quite light on operational requirements, and in relation to our partnership with WCVT under BEAD, there's almost certainly going to have to be another agreement that deals very specifically with the BEAD program. So I'm less concerned about that than I was when we did the initial procurement, but I think we may still want to have a level of review, which is having a look to make sure we haven't missed anything specifically in relation to federal grant requirements compliance and these programs in particular. And then the other one is specific expertise around I mean, there's general contract review, but then there's I'm forgetting the exact legal term. But we want to make sure that whoever is the main person that is representing us in the drafting and the back and forth is someone that is really, really skilled with corporate contract law, and specifically of the drafting of it, or the negotiating of it, versus just like reviewing a standard agreement and commenting on it. And I don't know, because I haven't had these conversations specifically with any of these legal firms in Vermont. I tend to agree it would be better to pay less per hour, but I think we need to go through that diligence of making sure that the individual we're working with is really, really strong on contract law, because this is a 30-year agreement, and saving money is good, but the stakes are really high. Because the thing that I raised with Waitsfield earlier is, and I'm sure I've said this here as well, is I don't think that EC5 ever anticipated what is happening now between them and GWI, and I sincerely hope that never happens to us, but you never know, and that is one of the things that we're trying to protect against. So that's my spiel, which is more just context setting for how I'm going to think about analyzing this. Spada.
Well, clearly I'm new to the board, so I don't actually know all the different legal folks that have contributed, during the last couple of years to get to where we started from to where we are now, and what services they've actually provide, nor understand what their expertise is. So it would be really hard for me if the only comparison is dollar and cents, well, then that tends to be a pretty easy decision to make. But the value of their expertise or services, or the number of people that are available to us because of the size of the law firm, for example, when we have deadlines to meet, start to really factor into the overall decision-making process. And I just don't have enough information to comment on that. And that would be something I would want to be able to review and understand before actually authorizing or going with a higher hourly rate than as opposed to a lower.
Yep. Lynn?
So I think we have to go with people who are the experts. And I mean, yes, the hourly amount matters, but you could pay more with somebody who is less skilled, because they have to scale up their skill level. And I just remember way back when I was working for the Vermont Community Foundation, the advice they got was, to get the best, as they were setting up shop there, and very different organizations, but we want somebody really skilled in contract law. We want somebody who understands these federal contracts, because they're so complicated. And to Ellie's point, when they're referencing, other documents, you just need to know the person is going to go and check that out, or they already know what that is. So these rates that you just put out here, 300, 250, it's so low. I mean, even in Vermont, there are a lot of attorneys in Burlington who charge 350 to 650 an hour. So anyway, this is all to say, I don't get to vote on this, but I do think it's important that we get highly skilled people. And to Zapata's point, we don't want a firm with two people and to have deadlines that need to be met, and that, they just don't have the bandwidth. So I'll end there, but basically echoing Ellie's concerns.
Thank you, Lynn. Adam?
Yeah.
I have a question for you, and it's this. I don't know exactly where we left off with the DC firms that we hired. So we did go out and get experts. Ellie and I recommended that we get experts the last time we did this, because we were going into a realm that we knew nothing about, and I don't think, with the BEAD grants, and I don't think many of the lawyers in Vermont had dealt with federal BEAD grants before. So that's how we got there. I guess my question for Ellie is, how much advice did we get, and how far along that continuum are we? Do we still need them, or can as Steve suggests, we've got all the information that we need, and the agreement's in pretty good shape, and we can go from there.
Well, so there's a couple things. One is we did get a lot of good information from them about some of the general concerns or considerations or missing things in the agreement, or the things that were open-ended that should probably be closed-ended. And so that is useful. I don't think we need to repeat that. We didn't actually go too far down the BEAD path because and even when we were filling out our BEAD application, they said, well, look, there's still not a lot of certainty around this, right? The program rules we had a totally different administration last year, right? And then even this year, and there's still no final state of Vermont grant agreement. So it was of limited utility to go too far down the BEAD path and see what BEAD implications might impact this requirement when things are still changing. So I think that there's that. And I think, in my head, there's two different scopes of work that could conceivably be done by the same firm or the same individual, or could potentially be done by different firms. One is like the basic contract law kind of story, and the other is the federal grant compliance bit. And even if you look at the DC law firms, they have different people doing those things, right? And so one of the things we could do is we could find a very good Vermont lawyer, because I also do appreciate keeping our money in state, who is really good with contract law, who can help us with that part. And then the people who are the experts in federal stuff are in DC, and we can contract with them for that portion. So I think that probably the most sensible next step here is to actually write out a scope of what we're looking for. And I think, like, rather than put out an RFP, what we actually, maybe we want an RFP, but I think what we probably actually want is to identify what are the skills that we want the contract law individual to have, and then see who we know that's in our portfolio and how well the skills stack up, or what other lawyers might be available that meet that, right? Because this is not the sort of thing, to Lynn's point, I don't think this is the sort of thing where the low bidder wins. This is where, if we want the best, okay, let's actually define what that means, because otherwise you're kind of shooting blind. So if anyone would like to work with me on writing that up, I don't think it needs to be too long or too complex, but it would just give us something to say, okay, here's what we agree that we want, and then we can go out and figure out who we think best meets that.
And would you be willing to assist Ellie on that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, anything else in this subject? Okay, so the next topic is cybersecurity. So I wanted to have this conversation in executive committee by Lynn. So in my role as Vacuda head, I've been sort of point for CISA, which is a federal agency that deals with cybersecurity, and then also there's been a request from the FBI for some information sharing in relation to logs and whatnot, to be able to help put together comprehensive threat assessments and so on and so forth. And the first one came through the VCBB, and the second one came through the Public Service Department. And my view that I intend to take up in my chair report as Vacuda chair, whenever the next meeting is, which is, I think, week after next, is that I think for us BEAD grantees in particular, but really for all CUDs, it would be a really good idea to make ourselves maximally available. So avail ourselves of the free federal service to help make sure that our cybersecurity is up to snuff, and then to share information with the FBI and other agencies, because first of all, as BEAD grantees, we are going to be targeted. We probably already are. I've gotten a significant increase in spam since that's gone out there. We're not as big of a target as any KCV, but we are still going to be a target. And Waitsfield is part of that. They're an attack vector as well. And we know that they have third-party firms, but it's having yet another, especially if it's free, independent verification, validation to make sure that things are as tight as they can be, to me, wouldn't hurt. And then also, if we don't do this and something does go wrong, the optics are going to be really, really bad. So that's my view, and I want to talk about that here before going out and spouting my opinion in a broader forum. So if you guys disagree with me, I will consider modifying my view. Steve.
Yeah, you and I attended a class or a session, online session put on by the state. And I did gather information on the resources, and one of the resources regarding cybersecurity offered to do an audit for us as well. So we might want to leverage that. I can send those contacts on. It was, and maybe you already have it. It's called the Vermont Intelligence Center, and they're both state of Vermont groups. The physical security is counterterrorism, critical infrastructure intelligence analyst, and the other one's a cybersecurity intelligence analyst. So at a minimum, if you want to go federal, we certainly would like to at least consider what's available in state.
Yep. No, I think that makes sense. But I mean, I think also just as a matter of course, if we get a mail from the Public Service Department saying, hey, the FBI wants to work with you, we should, our default should probably be yes. Right?
Yeah.
Zapata?
I'll send you what I got, Elliot, for what it's worth.
Fantastic.
I don't know how to phrase this other than Big Brother is watching, and there's a lot of controversy, especially now with working with the FBI, because there seems to be this association with national security and ICE and immigration, and people being really unhappy with the sharing of information, whether it was, I forget what the governor did, but he shared whatever, and that caused a huge amount of controversy. So I don't understand cybersecurity at the larger level. Like, I understand why I need to have a 14-letter password with capitals and punctuation and everything every time I try to get into my computer. But on the larger level, I don't understand. But the sharing of information with the federal government really has a distasteful lens right now in certain sectors. And I don't know how to spin that in a positive way. Other than I think that there's going to be a lot of questions of like, what does that actually mean? If the FBI comes to Maple Broadband, what information are you sharing? What is the requirement? Who might be targeted? And I think we need to be in a position to really be able to explain, A, that we actually understand what they're asking, B, being able to respond appropriately and accordingly, but at the same time maintain I'm going to say the privacy of our customers. And so the way in which it's shared, how the information is shared around the idea of cybersecurity and the sharing of information with the federal government, I think is going to be really important.
That's a great point, Zapata. And just to make sure that we're all clear amongst ourselves, what we're not talking about is sharing people's browsing information. I mean, a lot of that you can't even tell anyway because it's all encrypted, or people's personally identifiable information. What we're talking about is sharing things like network logs that might indicate if a particular foreign bad actor has been trying to penetrate our system. That sort of level of thing. But you're absolutely right that we should have these. We need to. I mean, I would never allow anyone access to our logs and records without understanding exactly what they wanted and what they were going to do with it, and also making sure that, yeah, it wasn't. But I should also say we haven't. I'm not sure if Waitsfield has, but I've never received any sort of request under the Patriot Act because there are existing laws that are old. That do enable the federal authorities to come and request customer information under certain circumstances. I don't think we have a lot of discretion, but I feel like we can bone up on that. But I feel like let's just stick our head in the sand and hope it doesn't happen. Because if it does happen, we're not going to have much of a choice in the matter. But what we're talking about here is network and attack vector kind of level of information, not anything specific to any consumer.
So that, I think, is probably the piece of clarity that's needed when you address the larger audience.
Yep, and that's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we should bear in mind the fact that really we're not running the network. WCBT is. Certainly we want to be mindful of all these items, but we need to mostly be comfortable that WCBT is protecting our assets appropriately.
Yep. Okay, so we got 18 minutes left. Let's move on to updates. Steve, will you give an update on Old Town Road?
Sure. Yes, I will do that.
And while he's pulling up photos, how is Old Town Road captured as far as infrastructure installed? Do we have to wait until fiber is actually pulled in order to account for that for miles gained?
Yeah, so the way we're approaching this, first of all, the network that we build, as we build it, it goes through some diligence to ensure that it's properly, the details associated with it are properly captured. So all of our network is validated, and then it's transferred to WCBT, who has software that they use to track the entirety of our network, and to the degree that they can do what they need to do, break fix and everything else. So as it relates to Old Town Road, we're in the early stages of that. So while it's being built, we're not really doing that tracking yet. But the very first thing that happens after the conduit gets installed, which will happen, hopefully very soon. Once that happens, we're going to receive a record of what's there, and it's really just some conduit and some other access points, and we will gather that information. We'll forward it on to WCBT so they have it. It's kind of meaningless because we don't have any fiber in those conduits yet, but that'll be kind of the basis for what we build later on. Does that answer your question, Zapata?
Yes.
And the other thing, just to repeat here, is we're not going to be pulling any fiber or activating the service on that until we have our Green Mountain National Forest permit, which is a whole other story. And of course, the relevant officer is now on furlough. So
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think what Willie and I know have learned is that it's going to take some time to get necessary permitting performed for this work that we're doing up in Green Mountain National Forest. And so my high level swag is that bead construction is going to take place in 2 phases. The first phase would be building out Middlebury, and while we're building out Middlebury, we'll continue to work on permitting. But based on the windows that we understand we're faced with, my estimate, which will prove to be incorrect or correct, is that we'll be building Middlebury in 2026, and we'll be building Ripon in 2027, pending what Ellie discovers as she continues to work her way through the permitting process. So this is what it looks like. It may look a lot like it did last time I showed this to you. Not nearly as much has happened as I thought it would. I thought by now the entirety of the trenching would be done, but as you can see, only the left side, which is the west side of that infrastructure, has been established with conduit. There's more work that needs to be done there yet. This is really I think it's a terrible situation we find ourselves in, because we don't have much control over this at all. The owner of the equipment that's doing the trenching is Green Mountain Power. They move at the pace that they want to move at, and we're just following along, doing what we can in support of it. So trying to capture pricing and things like that is nigh well impossible. So what I did do is, Elliot asked me a few weeks ago about what my estimate had been for how much this was going to cost us at the end of the day. Was the number you see up in the lower corner there. That assumed a lot. And I think it's very possible, since the work is not done, and that there'll be, I understand the last report I received is that there's going to be the big fun trenching machine that we watched working. We don't believe that'll be there. We believe that there's going to be 2 excavators, if they can find a second excavator operator, and they'll be doing the work on the east section. And that, I think, has been because there's been so very unsatisfactory pace at which the big trenching machine was working for whatever reason. So I can tell you, because I did do some validation, that the estimate for oversight, which is we send out GSI daily during each day that the work is going on. They come out and do a visual of what's going on and provide reports back to me. And at the rate that they're going, I think we'll be right in where we expect to be in terms of the project costs for the construction oversight. Something I discovered and I just sent on to Ellie last night, was that GSI has done a lot of work for us related to Old Town Road, a significant share of which is not. It's my estimate is going to be more like $16,000 worth of GSI services as we try to work our way through details to make sure that we have a finished product that meets our needs. So I think the best guess, I asked Eustace, who's doing the trenching, what can we expect in terms of, I'd actually asked for a statement. We've been into this for 3 or 4 weeks, so where do we stand? And I got a lot of hemming and hawing, which is not a surprise. They're providing work for 3 communications providers all at once with the same crew, and so it's going to be very difficult for them to carve this up in a way that's satisfactory. I've got some pretty strong opinions on what our share should be. I do know, based on the reports I'm getting from JSI, that Consolidated, which is one of these 3 comms providers, is they're behind the team on the curve on a lot of things, and so I think they're slowing the process down. My best guess is they're consuming more of the Eustace labor than the other 2 are. So I think really we just have to wait and see how this goes. I thought for a while about asking you for some approval for more construction funds, but I don't know that. And I basically, according to the report I got from Eustace, is that I can expect to get some kind of a status report in a week. At which point, if it looks like we're going to have a problem with the budget that we gave them, I'll be reaching out to the executive committee and getting you a report, and we'll make a decision on what we want to do next. So it's going slowly. Like, for example, we had, the rare rain that we had on Tuesday and Wednesday this week. They won't go out after a rain because the rocks out there are slippery, and they want to do it for the safety of the crew that they use. So nothing got done there. The other thing is that this past week, Green Mountain Power wanted to do work on their services, and so there was placement of a lot of gear that had nothing to do with Maple Broadband at all, but they got the priority. So they're, instead of running up and starting the work on the other end of that route, they're working on their own stuff, and to some degree it kind of it hampers our pace. So frustrating, but it's progressing, and we've got a good resource watching watching the activities, and I'm watching the watchers. So we'll work our way through it. Any questions?
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Finance Committee. I don't think I have much of an update that wasn't covered earlier. The next meeting is at the end of this month. I said what it was earlier. When is that? November 5th. Sorry. November 5th is the next Finance Committee meeting. Okay. BEAD and affordable long drop. There has been no movement on BEAD, still waiting on the federal government, and then affordable long drop is covered earlier. The amount of our grant request is on the agenda for next week, Monday's VCBB. So knock on wood, we will have that one done soon. And 2025 construction updates, don't have much of an update there other than the fact that I'm trying to compile a final set for Syracuse to come back. We do have some pole licenses. There's a relatively big one in Ferrisburg that's supposed to be done by the end of this month, and Lee Willett from Mission is in constant contact with GMP because this is urgent for us. And there's 2 railroad directional bores I was chasing on earlier and a couple of private roads. So we've been moving forward on this, but need to pull everything all together and get that going. But the current plan is at some point next month, Syracuse will be back up here with some crews to get going on that. And parking lot. So there was a couple of updates to the parking lot. We did cover the network management agreement earlier. We have another meeting 2 weeks from today. And yeah, Steve and I had a call with a woman on the Green Mountain National Forest permitting to understand that process, and have received some materials that I'm having a look at, and obviously need to understand as well the broader NEPA permit process for Vermont, which no one understands right now. I did also attend an NTIA permitting seminar a couple days ago or last week. I don't know what it was, but it was, I think it was last week. And there's actually some really cool tools that the NTIA has available to make this whole permitting story easier. So, yep. So there's some work to be done there. Anything else anyone has in the parking lot? Okay.
I
Shannon?
was just going to say that Cy and I did go over, we met offline and go over the draft personnel policy and sharpen some things up. So it's still in process, but we're working it.
Sounds good. Okay, does anyone have any other business?
Do you want to talk about batteries?
I think we don't want to talk about batteries until wait till it's going to get more information. We'll talk about batteries next time.
Yep.
But just to maybe tee it up, since we have now mentioned it, we have 33. Way back in 2021 or 2022, we purchased a whole bunch of batteries, and we are almost at the end of the stock of that. And going forward, we want to align more with the WCBT standard practice. And the question we have as a matter of policy is, in what circumstances, if any, should we include a battery as part of our standard installation versus having the customer pay for it? So we will be coming back with some more details on that, and we'll be discussing that the next time we meet. Speaking of the next time we meet, I would like to ask if we could possibly move that meeting, because as per my email, I'm taking my daughter to Boston. She has a 10 o'clock appointment the next day, and that is literally when I would ideally be picking her up from school and driving down there. And of course, having said that, that's the 27th. I have something on Thursday afternoon, so I can't do Thursday, which is our usual other day. Is there another day that week that would work for? And of course, actually, yeah, Tuesday I'm also going to be in Boston, so that's not great. So can we do Wednesday?
I can do Wednesday.
What date are we looking at, Ellie, please?
That would be Wednesday the 29th.
29th. I can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I sincerely appreciate that flexibility. I mean, I could make this work, but I'd be driving in the dark, and with a cranky kid, it wouldn't be as fun. Thank you, guys. I will make that move to the for those of you who have it in your calendars and get the invites, that'll be updated. But other than that, update your own calendars, and I'll update the websites. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So with that, I think we can move to adjourn. Have a wonderful evening, everyone, and see you in 2 weeks' time.